It really seems that change is everywhere. If you look around, your private life changes everywhere. If you look around industries, everything is changing, and that's probably not a big secret. But what do you do with this change? How do you adapt to this? I started in the internet business some 25 years ago, and back then it felt more like a mission than a job. We had to convince people that the new ecosystem, the internet, was able to drive new businesses, and no one would believe us. So we felt like missionarying a new religion. Now, 25 years later, it's very obvious that the internet is no longer an experimental ground. It's a hard business model and business area. At Google, we try to create services and products that are helping millions of users and hopefully enrich and lighten up their lives a little bit. We're trying to solve very big problems. When we created the company 17 years ago, indexing and organizing the world's information, creating a copy of the internet in our databases, sounded like a crazy idea. But we managed to do that. So we fixed and worked on the problem of organizing very large amounts of data through pretty radical solutions by creating algorithms that were substantially different from our competition back then, and using technology that wasn't available at that time. And that's kind of the mantra that we see for many, many new products that we work on, that we experiment with. In traditional business models, companies usually think with a hockey stick model. So you create your service or your product, you price it, and then you make some assumptions on how people will adapt to your product. How long will they stick to your product? Is there additional services that you can sell? And then you create over time a model about your revenue and your profits. So hopefully your business model will follow the nice little curve of the hockey stick model. At Google, we think completely different. We think about usage and users first, and then about revenue models, and which is really important to understand also how we tackle new industries and new product areas. We think about how to create sticky products that are so sticky that you would want to use them multiple times a day, just like your toothbrush, which is why some of the product managers call this test the toothbrush test. Is your product so sexy, is your product so sticky that people will want to use it multiple times a day? If that is the case, chances are that you have created something that can create a reach of millions. If you have a reach of millions, then ultimately some business ideas will follow. And so it kind of turns around the typical business model of companies, which is really important to understand for many of our services. And many of the business models are very, very indirect. My favorite example is Android. When we created Android, we had no business model for Android. So we don't receive revenue from the OEMs, the manufacturers of phones. We don't receive revenue or fees from the end users. So you could think, well, mobile phones work with data. You collect a lot of data through offering these services. So you can make the false assumption that probably Google sells the data. We don't need to sell the data. That is not the business model of how we operate. But Android offers a fantastic opportunity for the entire ecosystem, and that's the underlying philosophy with Android. So the equation that we hope to solve is, if Android helps to build a better ecosystem, if it becomes easier and more attractive for app developers to create services, and if the end user interface of an operating system becomes more attractive to be used by users so that they can actually consume and use the applications and services, then everybody will benefit because ultimately it will lead to much, much more usage. And this is exactly what we see. So a lot more internet usage on mobile devices. And some of these users will probably think of a search question, which we can then serve with some of the services that Google offers. So the indirect business model, a lot of things have to happen before we actually see the first click. So despite the fact that Android doesn't have any business model, today it is actually a sustainable business, but only because it helped build the ecosystem. When we think about products and Google, people think about the term data, but it's not about data, it's about insight. What can you derive from data? So data in itself probably has very limited value. You need to have people that can derive insight and hopefully even knowledge out of the data that you generate through operating your services. And if you think about data and big data, the heavily overused term in the last years, you probably should go one step further. A lot of the analysis of data is also less valuable than actually creating algorithms that can take some of this data and some of the insights and develop it even further. You could be as provocative as saying machine learning will be the new big data. And you already see a lot of this in several products from Google and from other companies. If you take Google Photos, for example, today you can actually search within your photos without tagging them. So the system will automatically analyze, if you give permission, will automatically analyze your photos and extract information. So the software, the machine learning algorithms will be trained with millions and hundreds of millions of photos and will be able to identify whether your photo shows a wedding, a birthday, a holiday, a beach, some sports, or some specific location. So I can go into my phone and search for my daughter Liv wearing a costume. So all the photos where my daughter Liv is wearing a costume will be shown in the search results without me having to tag that this is a photo of Liv or this is a photo with a costume. I can search for my son going windsurfing, or I can search for Halloween. So all the pictures that have a relationship to Halloween will be automatically listed in my search results. So machine learning here helps not only to analyze the data, which is the first part, but then also drive extractions and put intelligence and learning effects to many of these products. Machine learning is also heavily embedded in products like Google Translate, where we continuously learn to improve our services when you translate from one language to the other. Or in the mobility world, we also embed machine learning into some of our services, including Street View, where some of the Street View cameras take imagery that then is processed digitally, so we can extract speed limitations, so we can identify one-way streets, so we can identify street names, which we can then match with all the data that we have from other services, so we can create even more compelling services. In order to do that, you need new types of people. So there's a huge demand for new types of jobs. If you think about the 70s, this is the sexy type of job in the 70s. 20 years later, a sexy type of job is probably a beauty surgeon. And in 2015, the sexy jobs are digital analysts. You know, people that have substantial skills in mathematics and statistics that can actually help process this huge amount of data and generate the insights. And we foresee a dramatic demand for these types of jobs. So if you have kids, if they grow up, make sure that you teach them the right thing. On mobility, mobility provides us with a lot of challenges these days. You know, if you go into the advertising world, if you switch on your TV, this is how mobility is sold to you, right? A nice, warm summer day, you're cruising in your convertible car, everything is perfect, but reality looks more like this. In the US, people spend about 2 hours a day on average in commuting. Terrible, right? So a lot of wasted time, and it's also a lot of opportunity for doing dangerous things. You know, this is another way of reality. People start texting while they drive. A lot of accidents are induced by people being distracted from driving. So, for example, by fingering with their mobile phone. This is why some 10 years ago we started partnering with the automotive industry to see, you know, what if cars now become connected, and what kind of services can you provide in the car context. So some of the German manufacturers were among the most progressive players and embedded functions like Google Local Search, Street View, even Google Earth with Audi or other services into the context of the car. But it still wasn't useful enough. You know, we still wanted to iterate these services and provide even more value, which is why a few years later, together with a large number of OEMs, today some 30 car brands and some 20 technology partners have joined what's called the Open Automotive Alliance. And it's a consortium of manufacturers and technology partners that try to make mobility smarter, more useful, and ultimately safer. So you see pretty much every car brand of this planet. One of the projects of this consortium is what's called Android Auto. Android Auto is is kind of an extension to the Android software stack that works really, really well in the car space, in the car environment. And you can use, for example, you can use Google Maps or you can play your music on the large screen on the inventory of your car, and you can use the existing knobs and buttons and switches in your car, which is a really useful interaction. So you can plug in your phone, the application runs on the phone, and the output of the screen will be displayed on the large navigation screen while you can still make use of the knobs and switches on your car. And this is being embedded in record time. Within 2 years, the first manufacturers have launched and released cars that actually embed this technology. And it's an open platform, so it doesn't exclude other services or other platforms, and it also includes other developers. It's just like your phone system, where the end user can install yet another sound player, yet another music player, yet another communications device, and so forth. So the end user can freely install and update the system as they please. But that's not all. In mobility, we've been experimenting and driving a lot of product development in this space. So if you look at Google Maps has come from a standalone standard map service to now a fully integrated traffic including real-time service where you can provide a lot of mobility services as you go, including Waze information, a small startup that we acquired a few years ago that embeds information so that you can get real-time information on accidents or traffic incidents while you drive. We even have experiments with companies like Daimler and Nest, where you can kind of control your home thermostat from the car while you're approaching home, and the system will automatically detect that you're on your way home and adjust the temperature of your home. So a lot of experiments. We may not develop a business out of all of these services. And again, just what I said earlier, we're experimenting a lot. We are iterating really, really fast so we can create services that hopefully are helpful to many users. And if that's the case, eventually some of these models will turn into business models. And there's a lot of additional experiments with a project called Sidewalk Labs, where we're trying to improve the way people are moving today, how you communicate with data providers and cities and communities. Just a few weeks ago, we announced a better mobility project with a few cities in Europe, including some cities in Denmark and Sweden, where we're trying to create even better services related to mobility, so you can have a smarter city, better and safer services for end users, and ultimately probably a little easier life in your mobility world. And we also have some futuristic developments. I'm sure you all heard about the initiative of the self-driving car. I think what's really important here is that we can only do any of those things together with partners. Google is not a car manufacturer, period. Google is not a car manufacturer. We also don't intend to become one. Any of these developments can only be done with very strong partners in the industry. So for this prototype vehicle, for example, we are working with a number of very renowned partners in the industry, including many German companies like Bosch or Continental. And so what is the secret sauce? How do you work at this? What is the secret of driving some of these developments? I really think what's really key is you need new types of partnerships. It's not only partnerships between companies like Apple and Google and Facebook with the traditional industries, which of course is one of the big bases, but it's also partnerships with your end consumers. How do you provide great value? How do you provide great transparency when people deal with their data that is being created and used in the car? How do you create new partnerships with completely new types of partners like communities, cities, parking stations, what have you, car sharing services? So it's a number of really new marriages between partners that may not have been working very well together in the past, but we really are highly enthusiastic about some of the partnerships that we have been growing over the last 10 years. It's also about creating platforms that are open. There's no real value in creating closed shop platforms. So platforms need to be open. data needs to be used and be visualized in a very transparent form so that everybody understands what's happening. And they need to be open to embrace new players, like app developers, like additional companies that may want to make use of these platforms, and ultimately also to end users who can choose between platforms in a non-exclusive way. And being German, security and privacy is also obviously of key importance, and we designed security and privacy from the very beginning into in each of our products. So when you drive services, when you create business models, when you own a company, when you lead a company, you really need to be embracing disruption, because disruption is everywhere. This doesn't work anymore? Okay, there you go. If you look at a gas station 50 years ago, a gas station sold one thing: gas. That was it. That was the business model. A gas station today is selling a supermarket. So profits and margins come from a completely new area. As the owner of a gas station, you may think that this is a dramatic change of your business model, and this could be a threat. So yes, your traditional business model may be declining, while at the same time, new services and new business model, the supermarket, may drive profits in completely new areas. Another example is this: Springer. When I started my business life in the 90s, I worked for Springer. And Springer back then, just like many other publishing companies, hadn't fully understood and grabbed the opportunities that digitization brings. Now, with the arrival of Mr. Döpfner, they really made a change. And Döpfner has managed to create digital models that add his supermarket model for his gas station, selling print journalism, to a new world. And he now has more digital services that drive the majority of revenues and profit for the group. So really interesting. For the car industry, who knows if some of the car OEMs may sell less physical hardware. But in addition, there may be many more additional business models and services that now drive revenue and profit just because they can utilize the hardware better. So rather than having a car that stands around 95% of the time, you could have fewer cars that run and operate 80% of the time. And for those cars, you need additional service models. So again, you can create new businesses and services that may have higher margins than your original traditional model. So as a company owner, you need to disrupt yourself. If you don't do that, if you fail to disrupt yourself, if you fail to challenge yourself, somebody else sure will. And probably one of the startups that we have seen here may be working on a model that actually may be beneficial to your business. So you need to start doing that themselves. And innovation doesn't mean products. It doesn't mean always creating technology. Innovation means change, and innovation also means that you have to change some of the business processes in your company, embrace new opportunities, change hierarchies, change the way people communicate, change the business culture and the company culture. So you don't always need to do that through products. So again, coming back to change, this is a time of change. It's a time of opportunities. We're really looking forward to working together with many of the industry players in Germany, in Europe, and globally. So with that, thank you very much, and go change.